anyway.
Yeah, that can happen.
Anyway, we had a talk about that. We've had a little breakthrough with Michael. I got my car back from the refugee we lent it to because he has moved into town and is 9 blocks away from where he works. So I could have the car back, and I said, Michael, I'm getting this car back, and you're going to use it to find yourself jobs so you can raise yourself enough money to buy a van, because that's what he keeps saying he really wants. He doesn't want to live in Section 8 housing, even though he's fragile physically, more so because he's been homeless for so long. I think it took a toll on his body. But so he's out right now, and he says he's going to go to a place tonight to play an open mic and try to get them interested in what he does. And the stuff that Dr. Tim has been reading about allowing has been extremely helpful, because all of my judgments get diffused a lot by just saying, allow Michael to be who he is, allow him to be who he is. Let's see what happens. We have the time, we're not in a rush, we can do this. And Tim Bingham hits his let's get this thing over with ego state once in a while, and I talk to him about allowing and just allowing, and then he comes down and he deflates and he's better. And so between the two of us, we have these bouts of getting impatient with having some kind of decision made or closure, but it's slower than we would have thought we liked. And it's just been good, though, because the bad feeling, that terrible tightness, when you know you're in error, you know you're judging, and you're on the other side of the light beam when that happens. It isn't even like doing a wake-up sheet, or maybe it's an instant wake-up sheet, but
sweet.
It just helps a lot.
Sounds like letting go.
Yep, doing some of that.
Cool.
So,
awesome. Well, hold in space.
Thanks, and I'm waiting word from Lukey. He's so busy that he hasn't been able to either get on the radio show or do a wake-up sheet with me, but I've got an open afternoon till early evening, and so I'm hoping we'll do it. And if we do it without your help, I'll just give you a report. Anyway, nice to have that to offer him.
Sweet.
And I liked what you did, Michael, by suggesting that video and suggesting he do a wake-up sheet. You made me realize nothing outside of me causes anything, so I should change my language there. But anyway, you jump-started me into realizing that he and his girlfriend, even though it looks as if his girlfriend is in a power person thing that's replicating his relationship with his father, if they both use the tools, they might turn it into a healing crisis rather than a mess. And it would be lovely, since he cares so much, to be able to offer him some hope that there are things he can do before he gives up on that relationship. And I hope that's not a mistake. But
sounds
anyway,
right on track to me.
Good. All right. Okay.
Sounds right on track. In fact, there's a little piece that after our conversation yesterday that with some thoughts from the Course in Miracles that I'd like to share, and that kind of fit in with this this whole conversation.
Great.
Cool. But before that, I actually have a little story that I came across that I thought was rather cute, and I thought I'd share that. It's a story about a man and his wife and mother-in-law, and they go to the Middle East, and the mother-in-law passes away, and the funeral director, go to the funeral director, and the funeral director turns to me and says, we could actually take care of the funeral and arrangements and billing, and it would cost you $150. Or if you'd like, we can arrange and you can ship her body back to to the United States, and that will cost about $5,000. And the man instantly says, we'll pay the $5,000. And his wife is just so touched, that he would do that. And the funeral director is a little bit, confused by what making that choice. Is, well, why would you spend $5,000 when we can, take care of everything for just $150? The guy says, well, he says, there's this story about a man 2,000 years ago that died here, right in this area. And they buried him, and 3 days later he arose from the dead and says, I just can't take such a chance.
I knew where you were going as soon as you said that. Oh, Michael, that's great.
Oh, dear. Just can't take the chance.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a passage from the Course which we've talked about many times before. But it's one that hasn't come up in a long time, and our conversation yesterday really tapped into that, and it's about the use of words, and that oftentimes we try to use words to fulfill a purpose that they just can't fulfill, and we try to understand truth through the use of words instead of through forgiveness. Instead of when mind comes up with a lie, try to figure it out and try to use our words to do that. And the Course kind of moves the whole conversation in a different direction. And recognizing that the truth, the Course is really clear. The truth cannot be spoken in words. And so there's a passage from the Course that says, a theoretical foundation, such as the text provides, is necessary as a framework to make the exercises in the workbook meaningful. Yet in doing these exercises, it is that will make the goal of the Course possible. It goes on to say the Course is using words that come from what the Course refers to as the world of darkness, which would be the world of perception. And that it uses words in order to proclaim the unreality of the world of darkness and give the opportunity to forgive and remove the roots of false perception. And for me, there have been two really powerful paragraphs from the Course that, and this, of all the time I've spent with the Course, these two paragraphs, and I'm sure you've heard me say this before because I've shared this before on the show more than once, that there are two paragraphs that whenever I read them, over the years of working with the Course, and there was a time period where these two paragraphs, when I read them, would instantly put me into an altered state of mind. Like, it was just wild what would happen to my mind, and I don't really recall how long this went on. I mean, it might have been something, I just have the recall of reading these and going into this altered state. And I don't know whether it was 2 weeks or it might have been 2 months or 6 months, but every time I would read it, I'd go into this altered state. And then one day I read it, and it was just words on the page. Like that whole thing stopped. Whatever the process was that it inspired really just stopped. And so the passages are, it would indeed be strange if you were asked to go beyond all symbols of the world a while, words, of course, forgetting them forever, yet we're asked to take a teaching function. And this is really what you're doing in your relationship with your grandson. You have need to use the symbols of the world a while, but be you not deceived by them as well. They, meaning perception, words used in perception, do not stand for anything at all, and in your practicing, it is this thought that will release you from them. Words become but means by which you can communicate in the way the world can understand, but which you recognize is not the unity where true communication can be found. Thus, what you need are intervals each day in which the learning of the world, that is the constructs of your mind, perception, words, becomes a transitory phase, a prison house from which you go out into the sunlight and forget the darkness. Here you understand the word, the name which the Creator's given you, the one identity which all things share, the one acknowledgement of what is true. And then step back to darkness, not because you think it real, but only to proclaim its unreality in terms which still have meaning in the world that darkness rules. And whenever we recognize that the mind has this construct that's all logical and sensible and must be true, but it's not based on love, that structure is being, generally speaking, stimulated into activity and reinforced by words. And to allow that to collapse, and which of course is what the forgiveness process does, and allow the presence of love, the presence of light to come into that space for the dissolution of the pain that seems so real, so necessary, and impossible to live without. To give yourself the space to question the value of that. If it's not based in love, it's valueless. And then to allow the space to simply let it go rather than, I love how Richard Bach in his book Illusion says, he says, argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they're yours. And so the willingness to entertain the fact that anything that the mind offers us that's based in pain, to simply, no matter how real it seems, to recognize that that's just another construct of the mind that needs to be removed, to me is an important thing to make the space for, rather than struggle to keep it and hold on to it, to allow, here's a place of allowing that energy to be dissolved, to be removed, to be liberated. Somehow that all fit together for me as I was thinking about our process yesterday and where we're heading as individuals and collectively, and holding the space for Luke in this, transforming this turmoil and trauma that he's carried into this relationship that is probably the very energy that has resonated this particular girl into a space and created an attraction, which means they both have this wondrous opportunity to unload what they don't even know is there. Literally, to step into the space where these unconscious dynamics can surface, but surface in a space of gentleness. And it sounds like they have enough of a connection and caring to really join in allowing both of them to process through and heal the dynamics that each of them are carrying. So we certainly hold the space for you to be the space for them, and for him especially to be willing to move to that next level. I'm so delighted that he has that memory of how much that one worksheet changed his life.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, that's amazing. He got really excited. Would you like to do a wake-up sheet? It's been a couple of years. And he says, oh, I really like that. He was so enthusiastic.
That's awesome.
It's as if he hasn't done it on his own, but the idea. Also, there is something they say in abusive relationships. They call it a trauma bond. Have you heard that phrase? Yeah.
Yeah, that would be that'd be what I would call matching bags of garbage.
Okay.
It literally is what resonates people. Literally creates an attractive field that draws people together.
Mm-hmm.
And, you look at the culture's idea of sympathy, gee, I have this pain and I see you have a pain just like it. Let's get together and suffer. I mean, people call that sympathy, like there's something decent or wonderful about it. And, of course, the wondrous aspect of it is if we wake up and realize there's healing to be done and can cooperate and recognize, that it's through those interactions, through those connected places of pain that when we allow love to enter, it's transformed for both people. Back when I first started to teach on relationships and developed the what now is the Healing Through Relationships workshop, that workshop used to be called Healing Your Relationships because I used to believe that there was such a thing as a diseased relationship. And there is no such thing. Every relationship has that perfect bond, that perfect resonance and attraction that, as I said yesterday, the exact same relationship that will carry you to what the world calls heaven will also drag you right down into hell. It depends what you do with it. And there's the potential. And to have someone outside of that relationship, outside of that bond, that has the awareness and is willing to be the space and hold the space is like, what a gift. Would that we all could have had that at every instant of our lives. Someone like you're doing for him of just being that space and being that mentor. It's just so monumental.
Well, I'd like to put him in touch with you because like the time I worked with Kim on our Manchester group, the one you visited last time, I had done a wake-up sheet with her, and then she called you to either do another one or to go over the same one with you, and your insights took her a lot further. So that's one reason I want to sick Lukey on you, or sick you on him, or Dr. Tim,
I hope it
one
will open.
Can schedule. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I'm sure that if we could get him on the show with Dr. Tim and walk through a worksheet, he'd have a result. And then if he were to jump on and do maybe even, again, the identical worksheet with me, because of the difference in energies that we all hold for each other, I'm sure he'd get still a different result. And then he could do the same work. Remember what Yesha says, how many damn worksheets do we have to do? He says 77 times 70. So every one, will produce a different healing result. And the more powerfully that space of love is held, the deeper into processing through the root of that kind of trauma bond, the deeper the processing through it's going to be. So,
yeah,
we certainly hold the space for it.
Right, great.
It will be delightful.
I know.
Honored and delighted.
Okay.
All right, young lady. Well, any other thoughts for you today?
No. I'll just be listening. There's going to be a lot of hubbub here in a little while, but I'll try to stay on.
Okay, have a blessed one.
Thanks. You too. You too, Jean.
Okay, take care.
Good luck with the arms.
Thank you.
Well, Miss Jeannie, it looks like we've still got lots of time, 40 minutes almost. So is there anybody out there in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room? Questions from the app? Questions from email?
I do not have any questions we haven't addressed. And you can ask a question in the chat room, and I'm not sure. It says, could you send some of the here over to Manchester? But I'm not sure exactly what she was talking about. So I asked her, so Yinka, if you're listening, what is it that you're needing? We'll see if we can send it over.
So tell us what's happening, Yinka. What support can we be?
Oh, she's saying some of the sunshine.
Okay. I can relate to that. You getting a lot of rain over there?
So Susan and I were talking at the beginning about how it had called for rain for a couple of days, but we hadn't gotten any, and it was up high 80s, low 90s, and super hot, so she was talking about sending her some sunshine. So we'll blow some over that way. So if there's no questions, I guess we go back to enlightenment. So if you, a hand just went up.
Let's do it. Well, then let's say hello.
765. It's Sunny. Hi, welcome.
Hey. All righty.
Welcome, young lady. How are you?
I'm doing great. Actually, doing really, really well. I do see some folks are. I have some questions that come to me, and I'm like, okay. So if any of them are listening, to maybe from your perspective do a more qualified job of answering them, Michael. In presenting the work,
what questions have you got?
In presenting the work to a larger group of people, I had a woman ask me, so if somebody is coming at you and abusing you, do you not have a right to defend yourself? And I was only able to respond with, tonal quality of your voice to assert, make your declaration of I don't deserve this and whatever, or just be as peaceful within yourself. But if you feel it, any of their words stick with you, then that's something within you to be processed out either through a worksheet or the best way you know how, because these folks never having personally experienced you, I don't have an expectation that they're going to really fully get it, just, releasing audios and doing the best I can with the material, which you've listened to a good bit of that. But rather not a person, how a person might, what is it, at least represent yourself, and that I'm not going to be fall folly to your parade of whatever, and make your point and necessarily defend themselves, if that's the proper word. But when someone's coming at them, and I think that would probably be part of your work that you do, especially when people are in intensive at Heartland, the reentry program, so to speak. While a person's doing their work,
right,
there's going to be somebody there trying to pull you down, and then they meet with those resistances to your changes, that kind of thing. If you could speak to that, I'm sure that
I can. I can do that.
Thank you.
And we'll approach it from several different places, several different levels, because there are different perspectives on a circumstance like that. One place I think to look to recognize is if someone's coming at you, i.e., if there is physical danger, then anyone and everyone has the right to get out of Dodge. Step aside. It's time to move into a space of safety. I think that's a number one. There's never any reason to stand there and take abuse. And then to look on the level of creatorship, recognizing that, and for me, one of the greatest atrocities that has been done to us as human beings and that we've bought into is that we've had hidden from us the fact that we are by nature creators. And as creators, what comes to us, we have participated in. We have created it. Now, many people interpret that as, oh, you mean I'm to blame? I'm the guilty party? I'm the one who's at fault here? It's like, no, you'll notice that the worksheet process is a no-fault process. It's what that's saying is just to recognize that I'm a participant and in everything that happens in my life, and everything that comes to me, there's a part of me involved. But if I deny and hide that part from myself, while I am attracting it, I'm standing there saying, but I have nothing to do with this. And so recognizing that I have a part and there's work for me to do, there's an interesting passage very early in the Old Testament in the book of Job, and for me it's one of the first places in the history of the world that I know of that there's an acknowledgment or a rudimentary understanding developing of what's called quantum physics, which means participation to me. And here's this guy, Job, who's this wondrous, upright, everybody thinks Job is great, including the Creator. And then all of a sudden, he starts to lose everything. Like everything's taken from him. And he's trying to understand what has gone on. And if you read it, it's kind of interesting. It's a fairly long book, and if you read it, shortly after all these losses, he says to himself, like insight, that which I feared most has come upon me. That which I dreaded has happened to me. And what I hear there is Job is saying, this is a participatory world. There's a part of me that set this up. And it's interesting because he says that, but he doesn't get it himself, even though he says it. And that's kind of part of the healing process. Many times people will have an insight like that, but there's so much confusion and so much noise in the world, and that's what happens to Job. He rides right over that. And, he has friends that come to visit, and they're all sympathizing with him, and they're all trying to figure out what happened and what did he do wrong and where, the when, where, why, how of it all. And then finally, just before Job is restored, he makes the declaration that I'm going to let go of what I've been doing to myself. And when he does that, all of a sudden, everything that's been taken from him is restored to him. And that restoration doesn't happen via defense, because energetically in the quantum field, in this world of actual energy, the actuality of the world, the subtle energetic patterns that we put into the world create results. There's a great line in the Course in Miracles that says, "In my defenselessness, my power and safety lie." Recognizing that the minute that I put up a defense, I just set into the quantum field the very energy that will invite attack. And so, while number one, I make sure I'm safe if there's physical threat, the next step is to start to look at, and this is to me the whole of the reality management forgiveness process, is that when I engage in forgiveness in a given circumstance and I identify the goal that's involved in producing this result and I cancel it, then I get to, by canceling that goal, collapse the perceptual output of my mind that holds the belief of, look, I'm an innocent victim being attacked, the problem's out there, and boy, I have to do something about what's going on out there. And collapsing that false story, what I had shared a few minutes ago with Susan about, the world of darkness, the world of perception, that by collapsing that false story, I get to uncover the part of me, I get to start to be able to see the part of me and own the part of me that sets up this circumstance. And when I bring that part of me to the presence of love, number one, that part of me, which is a dis-ease energy, was stored somewhere in my tissue structure, and therefore is what on a level where we think of physical, is a physical disease. When I can embrace that energy in love, literally that load which has been somewhere in my physiology, creating a disease in my tissue structure, is removed, and physiological healing occurs. And two, as I own that and dissolve that, literally the request, a la, Job's insight, that which I feared most has come upon me, I remove that subtle energetic request from the world that the world is designed to fulfill for me. And when I remove it, I mean, literally, if someone does a worksheet in the middle of a conflict, I mean, someone maybe who's really done some practice with it and done a worksheet right in the middle of the conflict and dissolves the energy with which they're participating in this, oftentimes the person who's playing the role of the attacker will stop mid-sentence and the attack will just disappear, like the energy just went out of the attack and the situation changes like in an instant. And so on each level where one does their work, touching into the unconscious or the hidden part of my mind that is locked somewhere in what I call my body, creating disease energies, I get to remove the disease energy, and I get to remove the influence that brought this about in the first place. So Job realized that what created all of that for him, that which I feared most has come upon me. If you read the whole book, I mean, this guy's a pretty cool dude, but he has one problem. And I've never seen anybody who's looked at the book of Job and gone, oh, that's what was
Michael,
happening.
your voice just disappeared.
Did your mic cut out, Michael?
Not that I know of. Am I still there? Can you hear me? Hello? Jeannie?
I cannot hear you, Sonny. If you can hear him, say so.
Okay. Try again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Okay. Must have been something in my connection. Okay. So Job, what he ends up saying is, I'm going to take back my words. And his words were, if you read through, you can see that, he's described as this good and upright man, but there's something that terrorizes him. And that is that his children won't be as good as he is. And he has a daily ritual of focusing on his fear about his children and then, trying to make up for it. And it's his fear of loss over his children that creates all of his loss. And then in the end result, when he finally wakes up, he takes back his words and he's restored. And it's a subtle lesson, but when I realize that I am a creator and every energy that I hold creates results both in my physiology, in my mind, in my emotions, and in my world, if I see something rising to attack me and I apply forgiveness, I can remove that energy in an instant. Does that help to get where you want to go with your question? Am I on track with what you're looking for?
Well, it was not originally my question, so hopefully the person having access to the recording will get what they needed out of that. And I think it was more about, are we just supposed to be sweetness all the time, even-minded all the time, or not assert to address a person and, that is definitely got something going on with you, though you may not understand where they're coming from and they're just coming at you. If their words have any value to you or it hurts or you feel it adversely, that is in fact something to do a worksheet on. And that it is okay for us to, maybe when somebody is definitely kind of taking advantage of one's patience and not, regarding your request or your intention for exactly that, and you use a different tone of voice with them and explain
this is where, so to speak, I draw the line. These are my limitations. Or do you realize that that was not kind, that if a person should be making those observations and speaking that forth to represent themselves, I think, that is it okay to communicate even assertively your response to someone, I mean, otherwise we would be monotone. We'd be walking around like robots, but it's not to be malicious or violent in any way, but does a person have a right to assert or represent themselves, I guess was maybe most of the question there.
Well, my take on that, a different slant, would be that the first order of business for a human being, especially in our world as it's operating today, is to maintain our human lives. And if our own minds obliterate our human lives, and when I hear you use the word assert, and then there were some other words that I would interpret as being based in hostility or fear, that if I allow hostility or fear to arise in me to the point where I lose consciousness of myself as the presence of love, then I have a problem. If I can maintain my human life, do I need, or in the process of maintaining myself as the presence of love, do I need to lay down and let somebody stomp on me? Absolutely not. But if I give up myself as the presence of love, if I give up my human life to respond to that, then I have a problem. So I want to achieve the goal of maintaining myself as a human being. You look at so many people and they've given themselves over to, i.e., in order to protect themselves, they've given themselves over to so much rage and so much attack and so much defense that the awareness of themselves as love is gone. They've literally lost their human lives in the process of defending themselves. So for me, the first order of business is, can I maintain the presence of love in me in this response? And I can respond very strongly and very clearly, let's say in that circumstance of attack, I can respond very clearly and very powerfully as the presence of love. If I flip over into some form of hostility or fear, then I have work to do. Because that hostility or fear that's moving in me means that I've lost the most precious thing I have, and that is my human life. And when people go, well, I don't even know what that looks like, which for many people, when over the years, I can't count how many people have said, Michael, you're talking about this thing called love. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, they've so given that up that they have no experience or no brain cells for what that even means. And that's where, if you remember when we opened the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop, we always start with a question, and that is, have you ever held a newborn? Go back to the moment where you held that newborn and tap into the essence of that newborn. And then we ask people to describe, if you remember being in a live Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop, we asked people to describe in one word what the essence of that newborn would be. And we usually get words like sweetness, clarity, beauty, love, sweet presence. They're the kinds of words we get describing the newborn. And, if you remember correctly, I put that list up on the left side of the board. And at the top of it, write the word being. So here are the words that describe what our human life is. And my number one obligation is to maintain my human life. If I give that up for some form of hostility or fear, then I've allowed a dis-ease energy to overtake my physiology, and that's what's going to show up in my physiology as my diseases. And you remember when I do the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop, on the right side of the board, I'll ask another question, or Jeannie will if she's doing the opening, and that is, how many have ever done something they regret? And we ask people to tell us what they were feeling when they did what today they regretted. And 100% of the time, having asked this question of tens of thousands of people, 100% of the time the answer is always some variation on the theme of hostility or fear. So if you remember, you're sitting in front of a 4x8 whiteboard. On one side are all these words that describe love, describe human life. And on the right side are all of the words that describe things like rage and hate and fear and terror and trauma and such. And so if you remember, then I'll oftentimes point to one side. You know, we have a choice. Where do we live? If we come from a bloodline, generational patterns with nothing but hostility and fear, then most of that person's so-called life is on the right side of the board. They're in that hostility or fear-based state and thinking they're protecting themselves and, you know, all of that. They're the people I would offer that Yeshua said, they're the dead who bury the dead and the blind who lead the blind. To reclaim the presence of love in a circumstance of attack happening is a giant piece of work. To stay connected to being is, to me, it's the whole bottom line of the work. To maintain, to build awareness of, and to come from this place where I understand who I am as love, and I can speak with great clarity and great power from love, saying, excuse me, that's a line that you're not crossing. When I cross over into hostility or fear, I'm now in my own disease state. And, you know, if I'm in a situation and the energy's hot, I might go into that disease state. And as soon as I'm out of that hot energy, that hot situation, I'm digging out the pen and the paper, and I'm going to work and cleaning that part of my own mind that this person has just given me the gift of acquainting me with their attack. And it's a process.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Michael. The only other member... Go ahead, please.
No, I just say I'm kind of grinning with you. Yeah, it is. It's a process.
Yes, and as I texted you Saturday, you and I have had such processes between each other in the past, for myself anyway. And the regulatory speech and all of that kind of thing was kind of stuck with me for a good long time. And yes, your process, this process is incredibly beautiful. The only other issue that I have technologically is I can retrieve the radio shows from the website, put them in that particular social media, but then to play them back in the group. We've had several other people attempt it when I forward it to them, and whatever that looks like, we're not able to replay them outwardly because that June 11th, I believe it was by the time we got through some of the callers and the timeline I have to function in, was that like the 119, 123 timestamp, where you were doing what you do so eloquently, and the message was incredibly beautiful. And it was just right on top of everything for us. And I attempted to share it, and other people tried, and we just can't get past the technology. So that's just maybe for your knowing, because your messages are amazing.
Yeah, two thoughts. If somebody wants to download that particular show, if they go to our website, whyagain.org, there's a microphone in the middle of the page. If they click on the microphone and just follow the links, it'll drill right down, and they can download the actual MP3 of that show and play it. Or they can either download it and, you know, save it to their phone or their computer or whatever, or they can listen to it right from that link. And one of the things that Jeannie's been doing is converting the radio shows that we've been doing recently to MP4s, which are video tracks, and they're on our YouTube channel. So the most recent shows, actually the last, I think, 2.5 or so months, are all there as video files on YouTube. Now they've just got a picture, they aren't a whole video, but the audio track plays on YouTube on those dates. So Jeannie's been doing that the last couple of months. So every one of those shows, if it's within the time frame of the last couple of months, then that show is on YouTube if you look for the date. And then there are actually 2 people who've been assisting us. They've gone back and taken, and I think most all of our special archived shows, which are shows where we've done worksheets and such with people, they've converted those, and huge thank you to both folks who are working on that. And so a lot of shows now have been uploaded from the first year, like back in 2011. Many of those shows are available on our YouTube channel, as well as all of the special archived shows, the ones that we personally consider the best shows, the most important shows that we've done. And so they're also available on YouTube. So that might be another place to just check and see if you can find the date, that particular date, and see if you can get the file to play all right.
Yes, we have noted those, and thank you to you and Jeannie and that whole team that's making that possible, because we have shared a good amount of those particular shows already, and fabulous. It's just, that one
Sweet.
in particular, and maybe even today, that does help people to understand, that ability to, you haven't failed in your worksheet process or failed as a beautiful human if you're in that particular circumstance, to address such an issue for themselves and be able to have that material to communicate outwardly in a group setting like that.
Right.
I appreciate you very much, Michael.
Cool. What date was it, the one in particular you were thinking of?
June 11th. June 11th, and then today might be nice. Would be very nice, actually.
Jeannie, your mute button's pushed. Unmute. There you are. We got you now.
So June the 11th is listed as Enlightenment number 91 in YouTube. Because we've been doing the Enlightenment study, and so I was listing them by number.
Okay.
And so it will be on YouTube, Enlightenment number 91.
Thank you so much.
And I'll put the link for it in today's notes as well.
All righty then. Thank you so much.
Cool. Awesome. Well, any other thoughts for you, young lady?
Other than, and looking at the clock, there is an instance in that group where describing how people are triggered when someone, even if they are of like an Asperger's or high autism, lifestyle, what have you, does a lot of communicating in vulgarities. And maybe the energy or the perception behind those folks that do not have an expanded, or maybe do have an expanded vocabulary, and how to coexist with people like that, because that only happens for them once in a while. And beyond that, they're an incredibly beautiful person, to fully appreciate them, to where you maybe find yourself excusing or making every effort to coexist with someone who has those types of behavioral patterns, or just behavioral patterns in general.
Give me a little more of where you're heading with that. I don't quite get.
he's a beautiful person that will, you know, be a very, very high vibration, communicating, offering a great deal. But it becomes, once they get into a sense of humor, they tend to lose track of where they're going, and then they slip into multitudes of F-bombs and beyond. But yet when the person is able to retrieve themselves later, you don't find that same conduct in them. And
right.
It was kind of doing damage control there, because it's not good, and it's not necessarily, I say it's not good, it's not readily socially acceptable.
And I'm not sure what your question is there, or is that a question?
Well, maybe what is your take on people who do engage in, their words, and then if they're projected at people or what have you, where does that maybe come from? Where is that person maybe in their pain or their process of why they would choose to use vulgarity on the regular?
Okay. Good point. So first of all, I just sent you a link to the video track of Enlightenment number 91, the one you were asking about. I just texted it to you, so you can check that out and see if that works. So remember the codependency, interdependence, intense or work, where we define what we call a power person. And our definition of a power person is three things that make for a power person dynamic being instilled in a person's mind. One, it's usually between a parent and a child, though not always, and the parent has more power over the child than the child has. Two, the parent is not functioning as a human being. That is, they're not functioning out of love. And three, the child perceives the circumstance as survival. When those three things happen, and this is usually with quite young children, although again I've seen it happen with adults too, outside of a parental relationship, but the most common one is in the parental relationship. When those three things occur, the child, when you think in terms of the actuality of the fact that we are energy beings, we're not physical beings, the child's energy field opens wide. They become like a sponge and just absorb every energy in the environment, just literally just suck it all in. And that becomes a power person dynamic in that person's life. And for the rest of their lives, and my take is that this single principle literally is running the world. Because for that person, for the rest of their lives, when that power person dynamic is resonated into activity, their behavior is going to be keyed into their power person. And it's not a choice that they make. It's not that they have a choice about that. The person who goes along in the conversation, civil and decent, and all of a sudden up come all the F-bombs and all the hostility and such. What has happened is that the person who behaves like that is there's a power person dynamic locked in their minds. And as I say, there are only three behaviors possible for that person, literally for the rest of their lives. Until that dynamic is uncovered and cleaned up, it's going to run their lives. And the thing that determines what their behavior is going to do is not their choices, but rather the level of stress they're under. And you'll notice, it sounds like you've observed a person or maybe more than one person flipping into this type of behavior. And just take a look, and here's what has happened. When there's little or no stress in somebody's life, they'll do whatever they did to get along with their power person. When stress starts to build, they'll do whatever they did to resist and survive with their power person. And when they become ultra-stressed, they'll do what their power person did to them that they hated the most. And so that looks like, this person's Mr. or Ms. Nice Guy, And, you meet them and you go, what a nice guy, what a nice gal, and, everything's cool. But then a goal is in that person's mind that whoever they hold that goal for, themselves or someone else, that goal is not being achieved, and their stress starts to build. And that's when they'll move from Mr. or Ms. Nice Guy to maybe Mr. or Ms. Snarky. All of a sudden, the person who, you've known them for years, they've always been wonderful, but all of a sudden they flip into this snarky place. That's the second level of stress. And again, it doesn't have anything to do with choice. It's an automatic decision system in the mind. The third level is when they become ultra-stressed. What happens is the very behavior that their power person did to them that they hated the most is what they'll kick into and do. They'll do what their power person did to them that they hated the most to whoever's in the way. And so that would be turning into the F-bomb attack person. And they're just replicating the power person behavior. And again, it isn't that they choose to do that. There's no choice about it. In fact, many people who have observed that in themselves will say, well, once they catch themselves doing it, well, I'm never going to do that again. And they mean it. They don't want to do that. But not knowing how to manage their stress, and that's one of the reasons for the forgiveness process, because it keeps stress at lower levels. And not knowing how to manage the stress, when the stress hits that ultra-stress place, the automatic decision system just kicks in, and whatever the behavior was that the power person did to them that enabled the power person to be the winner, perceived the winner in the situation, when they become ultra-stressed, unconsciously look into, what did my power person do to win over me? Oh, that's what they did, F-bombs and attack? Okay, well, now I'm in enough stress, I need to win, and so now I'll do what my power person did to me that I hated the most, which they perceive as a way of winning. So I'd offer that's the dynamic that runs the show, and that's the Codependence to Interdependence workshop. And there is a Codependence to Interdependence worksheet on the website that you might want to look at. And under the DVDs or the streaming, there is a video that can be purchased of either a DVD or a streaming DVD that lays that whole workshop out and the worksheet. So you might find that helpful. And beyond that, we're past our time, so I'm just going to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. Create the best year yet of your eternal life. Thank you for those questions, young lady, and we hope